Welcome, everybody, to the reaction live show of round 5 at Southwick. I didn't do the round before because I was doing an Ironman and I was dying. So, not physically and mentally. But now, then last weekend we had the weekend off and I was hanging out with Jace. And then this weekend we have Southwick. So here we are. And the first thing I want to talk about is Praau, because there's lots of controversy going around this SOB as to he's washed up and can't do anything. Well, I think Southwick proved how effing good Praau is with putting it all together. And then I'm going to go a little bit into Jett and Deegan as to why they are doing so well. And it might surprise you a little bit, but let's look at the results of Horge Praau. Okay. He was 6th, 9th, and then 13th at Thunder Valley, then 17th at High Point. And this is when everyone was getting ready to give up on this individual. And then here he goes 5th with a 5.6, and both times he was relatively up front. Not to mention that in qualifying, the second time, I'm not talking about the overall qualifying because, yes, Justin Cooper was the fastest, but Southwick is one of those tracks where as it gets rougher, that's where the real men come out here, okay? Not saying that Cooper is not, just saying that the best lap times came from qualifying one, so that's important to know. And if we look at this, he was a 204 where Justin Cooper was a 207. And if you listen to the podcast with Jace, I was talking about, hey, like it's the bike. And then ironically, Roxon was on the AC's and JB's show saying that it was bike setup, which essentially we had the same view about stuff. Well, they're figuring stuff out because you saw Praau was able to hang with Jett for a little bit before he got disconnected, but it was good to see him out front. It was good to see that he has got some fire in him. And you know what's interesting is on the podcast, I did say that he may be a little bit homesick. And it's a new country. It's all this stuff, racing all the time. That's big. You don't have the normal people around you. And then it was cool to see on the broadcast that Chad Reed comes out of the woodwork and was like, yeah, I'm at Club MX. He's at Club MX. And you know what? I've been there. I wish somebody was a mentor to me because we all know to be successful, you need 3 things. You need somebody to teach, somebody to compare to, and then somebody to look up to, mentor. And that is the perfect man is Chad Reed because he's been through it. And he can say, dude, it's okay, man. Just you're going to figure this stuff out. And that's exactly what he is doing because there's so much stuff that happens off the effing track that we don't normally see. Because if I do go to the complete qualifying, everyone was at a 201 and Praau wasn't too far off, right? He was not that far. And he was faster than Hunter and Eli. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about Hunter as well, but I want to keep it vague and simple to the point where let's talk about Jett and Deegan real quick. And we are already 5 rounds in. Okay. That there's only a few more left. Okay. We're not quite halfway, but we're almost halfway. And the thing to notice is you've got guys from, hey, cheers from Tennessee. I appreciate it. It's probably hot as fuck there, dude, right now in the summer, getting ready for Loretta. Like, oh, you're probably sweating your balls off all the freaking time. So Andy, hey, appreciate you joining the live show. But my train of thought is it's a long series. Like this is literally race 22 for these guys. And that's a lot of stress on the body, not just you mentally. And moto is tough because if we look at like some of the guys in the 250 class that should be doing better, you got Juju, you got Jordan Smith, and they're like lucky to be inside the top 20. I don't know what's really going on with Forner either. He's seen some of his best friends with Jerry Robin getting paralyzed. And then also, he's had brain surgery. Like there's a lot going on there that could be inhibiting him. And with him, it's a little bit like what happened with Stewart is you take some time off, and then all of a sudden people believe that they can beat you. And that's kind of what happened. Forner has been in the 250 class so long. He's a guy that should be where Sexton is right now. And a little bit of digressing, Sexton racing next weekend at Redbud is going to be interesting. And then potentially the Kunan brothers, because the information that I have heard is that Lucas Kunan and they didn't gel well because KTM didn't have the bikes ready, and they weren't really ready to have the guys come over in Europe because it is a different bike. And then the guys over in Europe from KTM is going, guys, you got a championship you got to win here, but okay, we'll work at this. And then not to mention with pro motocross, the entry list, it's hard to get in. Usually they have like a 4-week deadline where you can't join a race that soon because, you're going to have to bump somebody out. And I mean, but it is Lucas Kunan and Sasha, so you'd probably make the exception. However, the information that I have heard allegedly is that it wasn't working out, and his agent involved is not the best to be at the races at the moment. So there's just some things that need to happen in order for them to go. And then second, it just happened way too fast. So Redbud is a sheer possibility. But where the hell was I going with that? I was talking about, was it Hunter or was it Deegan and Jett? So, okay. Truthfully, I think I was talking about Deegan and Jett with how many rounds there are. So bear with me here. I'm glad that it's nice and cool where you are in Rockford, because everyone in Florida and everyone is saying that it's incredibly hot. And thank you for listening to the podcast. It was sometimes it always is like a therapy session whenever I freaking go there and overshare and blah, blah, blah. So there's lots of information there if you go listen to it that probably didn't need to say, but you know what? I fucking said it. So that's what happened. But my point, why is Jett and Deegan so diabolically just owning everybody by 25 plus seconds? Okay. 22nd race of the year. Takes a toll on the body. If you're out there doing beast mode every freaking weekend like Tomac is, it's going to be hard. I mean, even though Tomac has just come back, like, you are going to run out of energy. You can't do an Ironman every weekend and expect to PR, or for that matter, you can't bench press every day and expect a new PR. You got to relax and you got to rest. And if you are Deegan and Jett, most notably Jett at the moment, because Deegan now with Hymas being out, he doesn't have that many people that are close to him as far as speed-wise, but Jett does have guys that are pretty close to him speed-wise, but it's close to him about 80%. So this guy can go hang out at zone 2, zone 3, probably realistically zone 4, race zone 3, zone 4. And for those of you guys that don't know, think of it as like 60 to 80%. You can ride out there and you can win. Well, then you have a guy behind you like Tomac who's riding 100%. That's going to make it hard for the next 40-minute moto coming up here. And then the next weekend, if you're riding at 80% and the guy behind you is riding 100% when it's super hot, SouthWick, it was hot, High Point, it was over 100, that's going to be difficult to continue that pace up where you're going to be more fresh. And I think that's where we are in the series now, where these guys are being more fresh. And I think that's where really Jett and Deegan are excelling, is their strategy is, I don't need to, like Stewart wasn't really happening unless he was winning by a minute. So he was just going out there and giving it his all. So you got to give it up to Stewart. But truthfully, my opinion is his career could have been extended if he slowed down, but that's not in Stewart's vocabulary. So, it's easy for me to sit on the sidelines and say, hey, this might have worked out better. But now you've got so much more involved in the sport and all these huge training facilities that is what's happening with Jett and Deegan, in my honest opinion, is, they're saving their energy. And when it comes to Hunter, he kind of alluded to a little bit of it on the podium, where he's just tired of his brother getting by him and beating him, right? And so what do you got to do? And my thought is he needs to have a different program. Have a different program. You see what's working for Jett, okay? But now it might do you better to be on a different program. And I don't think this is ever going to happen because that's just he's going to stay with his brother in Honda for as long as possible. But sometimes it works out when you try something different. You might go backwards, but then you might find something that gels and works for you. Okay. And then we all know how mental the sport is. Not we know that it's very much the motorcycle and it's very much the rider, but part of it being the rider is the mental aspect of it. And that is a big thing. Hunter knows how to ride a bike, but he's just got to be on top of his game and do things a little bit different than his brother. Catch him on a bad day, but also hide some stuff from him. And now we live in the world of everyone is riding together. They're training together. Pretty much everyone's secret. So that makes it incredibly difficult. And this weekend, I expected Tomac to really put it to Jett. And he keeps getting bad starts. And I've said this before on my channel that the only time we're going to see Tomac beat Jett is when he starts in front of him. And that's exactly the times that he's beaten him is because he started in front of him. When you start behind somebody as fluid and smooth and energy efficient as Jett, you can't let him get out front and get relaxed. You got to push him right from the start. You got to make him ride a little bit over his head to catch you. And then that's when the magic can happen. You got to try to get yourself into that flow state that we all so much look for and just dream about and it just admire being able to do that because it doesn't happen so often. And Tomac kind of going backwards. Yeah, I know he went 3-3, but I kind of expected a little bit more from him, and that didn't happen, which was unfortunate. And we saw AP pretty much fell right on his face, and he's a super fit guy, but he's very lean. And so there's really no extra calories that guy can look for. It's going to go straight to just trying to cannibalize his muscle for energy. And so that's why you probably should have a little bit of meat on your bones. And because if you're riding 100%, that's where I feel Tomac is so good with beast mode is his body's just kind of designed for that. And as much as people think that beast mode is him just accelerating, it's him just not slowing down. And this weekend, we saw him slow down where the lap times went lower and lower. And yeah, I see you guys talking about talent and condition. 1000%. And in the 250 class, dude, the Tom Vial, it's hard to say expect more out of him. I think he rode well. He came from the back, made some mistakes, came up, but when you're trying to compare him to Deegan, it's sort of a no contest at the moment. So looking forward to Redbud is we know AP is going to be strong, but then it's really, is Sexton going to come in and is he going to win? Maybe he's got the number one, but truthfully, what I believe is going on with Sexton is he's ready to start over. He's ready to go MIA with KTM and move on to Kawasaki. We saw it happen with Cooper Webb a few years ago when he was moving on to Yamaha. Like KTM was blocking him to go do some other races, and that was a weird scenario. And if Sexton is already pretty healed by now, and he had that crash round one where truthfully we didn't hear anything was broken or whatever, maybe concussion. So he took some time off, and I'm honestly surprised to be hearing him potentially coming back to Redbud, right? Because are you just going to race the one, or are you already back? It almost sounds like he's just going to race the one. At least that's what I've been hearing, which is going to be interesting for sure. But the Lucas and Sasha is I really want to preference that if that freaking happens, which I've heard it is happening, but again, you can never tell in this sport when rumors become reality or if they're just the rumors. But it'd be cool. It'd be good for the sport because we would see Jett be pushed because, Lucas isn't coming over here to lose. He's going to push, but, within his means so that he can still try to win a championship, because Feber over there is got him. And people are kind of making the correlation with Kawasaki doing so well over at MXGP versus here. Unlimited setup where you can make whatever you want changes to here is very limited. It takes a while to get a clean setup. That's why we see so many guys on privateer teams that like, oh, hey, look, there's an HRC Honda that's missing there. Oh, hey, look, there's a Twisted T Suzuki that's up for grabs. Oh, hey, look, there's a Star Yamaha that might be up for grabs. Honestly, I'm going to stick with my bike. Oh, hey, look, there's KTM. We saw that over Supercross, and a lot of guys were like, hey, I've got no time to test on it and everything. I'm going to be faster on my other bike, because there's no doubt that a 450cc motorcycle is fast. And truthfully, the only guy that we know that kind of rides it to its potential is really Tomac, because he's just constantly WFO. And then you got guys like Jett that are just very fluid and raw. And I saw some things from Jett that we will need to look at this week's show for sure, that I'll break down, because I did see a couple things that were pretty special. But he was winning by 20 plus seconds, and Deegan went back and forth with winning it by 20, and then the next moto he just stayed it right at 10. Like, that's literally what you guys should get away from this show, is Jett and Deegan are maintaining not only the points lead, but their lead in general at the race. They don't need to continue to be faster. That's why we didn't see a gap really get any bigger or have somebody just completely catch them. They were managing it with the pit boards, knowing just how fast they needed to go, because they're saving energy for the next weekend. And some of the comments, Shimoda had a huge comeback. Yes, absolutely, dude. Joe is really the only guy that I could see coming up to try to dethrone Deegan from what Hymas, because Deegan would literally be a perfect season as of right now. Not just Southwick, where he went fastest qualifier, whole shot, win both motos, but literally win every freaking moto if it wasn't for Thunder Valley, which he was pissed at when I was there. But stop comparing Deegan to Jett. Why not, dude? When you're talking about guys that are, what Deegan is doing in the 250 class is what Jett is doing to the 450 class. Plain and simple, is he's just waxing them. I think that's a fine comparison to say between the two. If you want to, like, I know comparison is the theft of joy. At least that's what the famous quote is. However, we won't really see the full-on one-to-one comparison until Deegan is on a 450, because I've made the comparison that Deegan rides more like Tomac, but he's just younger and potentially has more fire in him, right? So, and Tim thinks that Tomac just gave up. I mean, you got to save energy at some point, and if you know you're 3-3, he's a smart man. He's going to know exactly that's what is going on. So, Tim, yeah, there's possibility that you're not going to just completely throw in the towel, but you're not going to make sure that you just end up 9th, right? I think AP was more of just completely gassed, where Tomac was like, well, fuck, man, I'm not catching anybody, so we're just gonna go in there. But Prado, going full circle here, Prado, we saw what he's capable of, and everyone over the last week or so, and I've seen so many comments of giving this individual a hard time, it has nothing to do with him riding the bike. It has everything to do with the situation that he's currently in, with new team, new tracks, moving away from home. To be honest, not to sound, I'll just say it, like, traveling 22 weekends in a row is pretty tough when you don't have the same group of people around you. So, this is a building race for him, and it's only 5 races in. Okay. We're right around halfway. We're going to see more of Prado getting a podium finish here. Do I think he can beat Jett on a perfect day? Yes, I do. But he's got to have everything gel. He's got to start out in front of him. He's got to have the best setup that bike has. And he's got to believe in himself, right? So it's a building thing. And we don't see the Cowies doing that well, even in the 250 class, as far as power goes, right? Sorry, some of the comments, guys. You make me giggle when you hear stuff, and that one is to be determined, right? That's what I think is so cool. Is Jett versus Deegan in the 450 class is to be determined, right? The biggest thing that Deegan has on Jett is his mental, just no fucks given type attitude. I know Jett's been through a lot here, but I want to say he's more of like the Ryan Dungey, where he's the fan favorite. He's the classic poster child of the sport of like who you want a sponsor. And I know people might take that a little bit out of context too, but he's just a goofy kid that's super fast on a motorcycle. And then Deegan, I mean, his dad's the general, metal militia. He's rough around the edges, but a little bit as kind of like the poster child as well. So it's one of those things where off track, Deegan can get into Jett's head, and that might portray to the battles that are going on. You know, what is said off track? What are the little antics that happen, right? Get Jett to start worrying about Deegan, get him out of his flow state, because that's the kind of strategy that you'd have to beat that dude, right? There's nothing wrong with that. We've seen that happen time and time again with Jason Lawrence and Ryan Villapoto, Jason Lawrence and Ryan Dungey, you know, even Stewart and Chad. We saw that a little bit. Like, what do you think Ricky did? Ricky got into people's heads, right? He made people scared of him. He wasn't always the fastest guy, but he wasn't going to give up. You know, Ricky Carmichael's kind of like the Nate Diaz of motocross, where, you know, if you're going to say that you're Conor McGregor and you're just punching Nate Diaz and he's just not going anywhere, he just keeps coming back like a zombie, that's Ricky Carmichael. And that's why he was so successful, is because he even said that he wasn't the most talented. He just worked the hardest, right? Straight bulldog mentality. And that's what Deegan has. But hey, guys, thanks for joining the live show. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And this week, I'm going to have that breakdown. That's probably going to be on Tuesday. And Grant Langston is coming on the podcast on Monday with Coach Rob. So guys, make sure you look that. I'll probably put it up on the channel in just a few, just to start a waiting list. But as always, keep it WFO. Your comments, guys.